There was a moment, not that long ago, when one of the most recognizable toy companies on Earth was quietly falling apart. You probably had their products somewhere in your house growing up. Your parents probably stepped on one in the dark and said something they regretted. Across decades, across countries, across generations, almost every kid has touched one of these little plastic bricks. And still, in the early 2000s, the company behind those bricks was losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Sales were slipping. Kids were moving toward video games and screens. Inside the company, executives were staring at numbers that made no sense. Products that looked successful on store shelves, but were somehow losing money every time they sold. By most honest measures, the company was only a few bad decisions away from disappearing. That company was Lego. And this is where the story gets strange. That near-death experience did not just save Lego. It changed what Lego was. Today, Lego is not just a toy company. It makes movies that bring in hundreds of millions of dollars. It runs theme parks. It powers video game franchises. It shares cultural space with Disney, Marvel, Nintendo, and Star Wars. And in some cases, it has turned all of them into Lego. So how does that happen? How does a company that almost died selling plastic bricks become one of the most powerful entertainment brands on the planet? That is what this video is about. And the real answer is not just great branding or a hit movie. It is stranger than that, more counterintuitive than that, and much more interesting than the version most people remember. To understand how Lego almost died, you have to understand what Lego actually is. Because that is the part people usually simplify too much. Lego began as a small family business in Denmark. It was not built around a character. It was not built around a movie, a mascot, or a finished story. There was no Mickey Mouse, no Mario, no Iron Man sitting at the center of the brand. Lego was built around something much simpler and, in a way, much more powerful, an open system. A Lego brick by itself is almost nothing. It is just a small piece of molded plastic. But connect it to another brick, and suddenly you have a beginning. Add 100 more, and now it can become a spaceship, a castle, a pirate ship, a city, your bedroom, your dream house, or something that has no name because you invented it yourself. That was the quiet genius of Lego. Most toys give children a finished world. A doll has a name. An action figure has a backstory. A board game has rules. Lego gives you pieces and says, build the world yourself. So kids were not just consuming a story when they played with Lego. They were making one. Every child who opened a Lego box became, in a small way, an author, an architect, a director. That was the thing Lego understood from the beginning, and later, it became the thing Lego almost forgot. Because when a company gets something that right that early, success can become dangerous. It can make the brand feel invincible. It can make leaders believe the magic will work anywhere, in any category, no matter how far they stretch it, and that is exactly where the trouble started. By the late 1990s, Lego had decades of success behind it. The bricks were everywhere. Parents had grown up with them, and now their children were growing up with them too. Inside the company, one idea started to sound obvious. If Lego wanted to keep growing, Lego had to do more. More products, more categories, more experiments, more of everything. So Lego started expanding in directions that now feel almost surreal for a company built on bricks. Clothing lines, watches, theme parks, video games, lifestyle products. Sets that were less about open-ended building and more about recreating one fixed scene exactly the way the instructions told you to. Even the bricks began to change. The classic Lego system was powerful because it was simple. Basic shapes, standard colors, pieces that could be reused endlessly. But as the product lines got more ambitious, the parts got more specific. A helmet for one character, a sword for one theme, a dragon wing for one set, a piece that looked exciting in the box, but had almost no life outside that box. From the outside, this looked like creativity. It looked like momentum. It looked like a beloved brand pushing into the future. But underneath, the system was getting heavier. Every specialty part meant a new mold, a new cost, a new manufacturing problem. Every new category meant new teams, new partnerships, new complexity, and new ways to lose focus. And while Lego was busy trying to become bigger, the world around it was changing fast. Kids in the late 90s and early 2000s had choices their parents never had. Video games were getting better. The internet was arriving. TV was more addictive. The fight for a child's attention was no longer happening only in the toy aisle. The real danger was not that Lego had run out of ideas. The danger was the opposite. Lego had too many ideas, and almost all of them were pulling the company further away from the thing that made Lego matter. By the early 2000s, the math finally caught up. Lego was bleeding money. The reports were brutal. Sales were not turning into profit. Costs were out of control. And then the company discovered one of the worst things a business can discover about itself. Some of its products were losing money every time they sold. That sounds impossible at first, but it is exactly what complexity does when nobody controls it. Lego had sets that looked successful. They were moving off shelves. Kids wanted them. Retailers stocked them. But once you added up the specialty pieces, the molds, the licensing, the production costs, and the inefficient supply chain, the company could lose money on the very products that seemed to be working. Think about how painful that is. Every kid walking out of a store happy with a new Lego set was, in a small way, pushing Lego closer to the edge. That is one of the worst positions a company can be in. You cannot simply sell more because selling more makes the problem bigger. You cannot just raise prices because then families stop buying. You cannot disappear from the market because the brand still needs to stay alive. Lego had built itself into a trap. The company had become so complex that even success was starting to hurt it. The brand was loved. The bricks were iconic. Generations had memories attached to them. But nostalgia does not fix a broken business model. The numbers did not care how much people loved Lego. So what did Lego do? Did it invent a completely new toy? Did it chase kids onto screens and try to beat video games at their own game? Did it sell itself to a bigger company that wanted a famous name? No. Lego did something that sounded much simpler and was much harder. This is the part of the comeback story that usually gets skipped. When people hear Lego came back, they imagine one big, glamorous turning point, a blockbuster movie, a genius marketing campaign, a breakthrough product, one brilliant idea that changed everything overnight. But that is not what saved Lego. Lego was not rescued by adding more ideas. It was rescued by finally having the discipline to remove them, to cut, to simplify, to stop chasing every possible version of growth, to say no. That is what makes the story so counterintuitive. The company famous for unlimited creativity almost destroyed itself with too much creativity in the wrong places. And it survived by becoming ruthless about what counted as Lego and what did not. The movies, the games, the theme parks, the cultural dominance, all of that came later. Before Lego could become bigger than a toy company, it had to face the truth that it had become creative in ways that were slowly killing it. So Lego started cutting. Product lines that did not work were dropped. Specialty pieces that only made sense in one set were reduced. Side businesses that did not connect to the core were sold, shut down, or restructured. Theme park operations that were draining cash were changed. The company stopped treating every idea as an opportunity. Instead, Lego started asking a harder question. What is Lego? Actually, what do we do that no one else does? And the answer was almost embarrassingly clear. Lego is a system, a set of simple, standardized, endlessly combinable pieces that let people build what they imagine. The licensing, the entertainment, the marketing, the partnerships, all of that only works if the system stays strong. So Lego went back to the brick. It simplified. It focused on the lines that truly worked. City, Technic, and the sets that real builders came back to again and again. It paid attention to what people actually built with, not just what looked exciting in a catalog. And Lego did one more thing that became much more important than it may have seemed at the time. It started listening to its fans, not only children, though children still mattered. Lego began paying real attention to the adult builders, the collectors, the custom designers, the people making huge creations and sharing them online, the architects, engineers, artists, and hobbyists who treated Lego as more than a childhood toy. For years, those adults could have looked like a niche, a strange little corner of the brand. But Lego realized they were not a side audience. They were proof of the whole idea. They proved Lego was not something people simply aged out of. It was a creative language that could last a lifetime. And once you understand Lego as a language, not just a product, the future changes. A product has limits. A language can describe anything. It can absorb anything. It can be used to tell stories that did not exist before. That shift is what made the next version of Lego possible. Here is where the story gets interesting, because Lego did expand again. It expanded massively, but this time it expanded with a much stronger sense of what it was protecting. Lego teamed up with some of the biggest entertainment franchises in the world: Star Wars, Harry Potter, Batman, Marvel, Indiana Jones. Eventually, almost every major piece of pop culture seemed to get a Lego version. At first, this looks like the same mistake from the 90s. More licenses, more products, more complexity, more everything. But this time, the logic was different. Lego was not just putting famous names on plastic boxes. Lego was not making ordinary Star Wars merchandise. Lego was making Star Wars out of Lego. That difference is small in wording and huge in meaning. When you buy a standard Star Wars action figure, you are buying a piece of Star Wars. The toy exists to deliver that franchise. But when you buy Lego Star Wars, you are buying Star Wars through the Lego worldview. The blocky shapes, the tiny minifigures, the humor, the building process, the feeling that this universe can be taken apart and rebuilt. Darth Vader becomes a tiny figure with stubby arms, and somehow the most intimidating villain in cinema becomes a little bit funny, a little bit adorable, and still completely recognizable. The Lego video games understood the same trick. They did not try to make serious, faithful adaptations of Star Wars, Harry Potter, or Marvel. They turned those worlds into playful, family-friendly comedies. Stories people already knew suddenly felt fresh because they were happening to little plastic figures who could fall apart, reassemble, and make familiar scenes feel charming again. That was the secret. Lego did not simply borrow the power of other brands. It Lego-ified them. Every franchise that passed through Lego came out with Lego's fingerprints on it. But if Lego wanted to become a true entertainment brand, not just a toy company licensing other people's stories, it had to do something much harder. It had to tell a story about itself. When the Lego Movie was announced, the obvious assumption was that it would be a 90-minute commercial, a corporate cash grab, a piece of brand content pretending to be a movie. People expected it to be shallow at best, embarrassing at worst, and then it was actually good. More than good, it understood Lego. That is why it worked. The movie was not really about plastic bricks. It was about the central tension inside Lego itself, the tension between wild, joyful, messy creativity and a rigid world where everything has to follow instructions and stay exactly where it belongs. The villain literally wants to glue the world in place. The hero learns that anyone, not just the chosen ones, not just the experts, not just the master builders, can create. That is not just a children's movie message. That is Lego's entire philosophy turned into a story. And yes, everything is awesome became a meme. Yes, the song was everywhere. But underneath the joke, the message landed. It landed with kids, and it landed with adults who remembered dumping bricks onto a carpet and disappearing into their own imagination for hours. That was the moment Lego crossed a line. It was no longer only selling boxes on a shelf. It was selling a world view, a feeling, a way of seeing creativity. The product had become culture. And once a brand crosses that line, it is not just competing with other toys anymore. It is competing in the same space as Disney, Pixar, Marvel, and Nintendo. It is no longer just something children play with. It is something people recognize, quote, revisit, and pass down. Step back and look at what Lego has now, because once you see the pieces together, the strength of the brand becomes obvious. Lego has three things at the same time, and very few companies can say that. First, Lego has a system. The bricks are still the foundation. They are standardized, durable, and endlessly combinable. A Lego brick from decades ago can still connect with a Lego brick made today. That consistency matters. It means Lego is not only selling new products, it is maintaining a creative platform that keeps working across generations. Second, Lego has a community, not a casual audience, a real deep, multi-generational community, kids, parents, adult fans, collectors, professional builders, YouTubers, designers, conference attendees, people who build for fun, and people who build like it is art. People do not just buy Lego, use it once and move on. They live with it, they store it, they rebuild it, they pass it down. Third, Lego has a cultural layer. It can absorb almost any piece of pop culture, Star Wars, Marvel, Minecraft, Harry Potter, Batman, and translate it into Lego without losing its own identity. That is rare. Lego has become a kind of cultural translator. Whatever the world is paying attention to, Lego can speak it in its own language. And this is the deeper reason Lego stands apart from its biggest competitors. Disney is powerful because it owns characters. Marvel is powerful because it owns superheroes. Nintendo is powerful because it owns gameplay and nostalgia. Those companies invite you into worlds they have already built. Lego does something different. It gives you the tools to build the world yourself. You are not only watching, you are not only consuming, you are participating. And when a brand makes people feel like co-creators, they do not just like the brand. They feel connected to it. They feel some ownership over it. They feel like they belong inside it. That is the real reason Lego became one of the most powerful entertainment brands in the world. Not just because it makes great toys, but because it makes people feel like reality can be taken apart, rearranged, and rebuilt with their own hands. So this is the arc. Lego almost died when it tried to be everything. It stretched itself into clothing, watches, theme parks, complicated product lines, and ideas that no longer felt connected to the thing people actually loved. The company was trying so hard to grow that it lost track of what made it valuable in the first place. Lego survived when it remembered what it was. It cut. It focused. It simplified. It went back to the brick. That part of the story is less glamorous, which is why people often rush past it. But without that discipline, none of the movies, games, licenses, or cultural power would have followed. And Lego became powerful when it learned how to expand without losing itself. It carried its identity into every new space instead of leaving that identity behind to chase whatever looked profitable next. That is the trick most brands never figure out. Many companies get weaker as they grow because growth waters them down. Lego got bigger by becoming more Lego. That is why the brand has lasted across generations and why it will probably last across the next ones too. Lego did not become an entertainment empire by running away from the toy that made it famous. It became an empire by realizing that the little plastic brick was never just a toy. It was a way to imagine, to tell stories, and to rebuild the world the way you wanted it to be. If this kind of breakdown is what you like, drop a comment and tell me which brand you want me to take apart next. Nintendo, Disney, Marvel, Mattel, Pixar. There is a story like this hiding inside almost every company that shaped your childhood. And I want to know which one you want first. And if this video made you look at Lego a little differently, if those bricks suddenly feel like more than bricks, hit subscribe. Because on this channel, we do not just tell brand stories. We figure out how some of them quietly became part of the culture we live in. I will see you in the next one.